explain the base layer of this whole thing for people. Like when it comes to like becoming a church, right? And getting, like, how do you actually become a church, and why is this system not working?
Yeah. So there's estimated of 400,000 registered quote unquote churches in the U.S.
And sorry to interrupt, how much money do they make too?
Domestically about 550 billion, and then globally about 1.1 trillion a year in individual donor giving. So if that's just Christian churches, that doesn't include Islam,
this is all
Hindu,
donations?
All donations.
1.1 trillion
1.1
globally.
trillion. Okay. So it's bigger than the U.S. military budget for now. They're asking for 1.5 trillion now. And they're going to take from social programs, American social programs, to fund that military industrial.
Really?
Fund. Yeah. But so
we're becoming the Antichrist country.
Yes, dude. We can talk about the Antichrist and just theoretical ideas.
Yeah.
But so you have to pick a sandbox, right? If you're accepting money, you are a business. And so in America, there's really like three main buckets of business. There's for-profit companies, there's nonprofit companies, and then inside that nonprofit sandbox is religious exemptions.
Got it.
And so the government created these sandboxes to play in, because you just have to you have to pick a sandbox to play in. What rules control this business? And so in 1913, the government was like, hey, churches do something really beautiful. They help in the lower marginalized communities of parts of our communities. And so we're going to give them a special tax exemption where they don't have to pay taxes. So the nonprofit sector is only 112 years old, which doesn't seem like much, but that's a very new sector. And so what the government saw was religious organizations are helping in the spot that capitalism leaves behind. And so what I mean by that is, as capitalism raises the net worth or GDP of a nation, there is a group that's always left behind. And so that is where Christianity thrives, with the needy and the helpless and the elderly and the orphaned and the widowed and the marginalized. And so at the time in 1913, churches, your life was pretty small. Your world was about an 80-mile radius, right? You wouldn't be going past 80 miles because we didn't have cars really, and we didn't have technology.
Right.
And so your local community was your world. So we wanted to better our local community. I wanted to better the park down the street because I wanted all our kids to be safe, So it's this idea of social capital. So we wanted to build social capital in our local communities. And the government, the U.S. government, rightly so, said, hey, let's carve out this sector for organizations that are helping in their local communities that we can't, as a federal government and state government, go do. Awesome. And so there was about 12,000 organizations at the time that got this exemption. And so what did they do? They worked in their local communities. They had food pantries and homeless shelters, and they did beautiful things. Well, as technology develops, we have radio, TV, internet. Now these nonprofits start looking out because there's more money to be had outside the local community. Right? So this is no one person's fault, but as you start looking and you're saying, hey, there's 5,000 people in my town. Well, with radio, we can reach 50,000. With TV, we can reach 500,000. With the internet, we can reach, 5 billion. So instead of your vision as a nonprofit being about the local community, now it goes global. And now it becomes how much money can we scrape off the table, and our mission and our marketing angle is these helpless people. But the nonprofit sector has totally lost its original sight. The government saw this sector as building local social capital in your local community. And now the most successful nonprofits sucking the majority of the money are looking global. And so now they don't really care about that local fabric anymore.
Right.
And so remember I said there's 12,000 organizations in 1913 that got that exemption?
Yeah.
Today there's 1.9 million in the U.S. And the only argument that you can push back on is, well, Nathan, population increase. Okay.
Right.
Population increased 4.3% over the last 112 years. So if you do that math, there should be about 60,000 organizations. But today there's 1.9 million.
And how many of those are churches?
400,000.
400,000.
Yep. And so you have to ask why that.
And each church, okay. 400,000 churches.
Religious institutions.
And are they all Christian?
No, those are religious institutions.
Just religious institutions.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so you have to ask why the explosion in the sector. It's not because our social fabric's getting any better. It's because people have realized, smart businessmen and women have realized that the nonprofit sector is the greatest sector to put money and raise money, and then religious exemptions in particular are the best sector to play in a totally dark world. And I'll explain what I mean by that. So you have the nonprofit sector. Nonprofit has to file what's called a Form 990. Mm-hmm. It's an annual informational sheet. It just shows the federal government where your money goes, whether you raise whether you raise $50,000 or $50 million. It's just a simple waterfall of, hey, here's the top executive salaries and here's where the bulk of our money went.
Right.
Awesome. No one should be afraid of that document. But churches, religious institutions, do not have to file that document. And so what that does is it means there's no legal document a religious organization can be held to account on.
They don't report anything to the IRS.
They report nothing to the IRS.
Wow.
And so what I mean by that is if your church is 500,000, and this is an argument that we get all the time. Nathan, you're always going after, sure, the big churches are bad. The small churches are good. There's a lot of, and I want to preface this, there's a lot of good churches and a lot of good pastors that want to do the right thing. But so I've got a $50 million church, you've got a $50,000 church. My $50 million church, that $50 million, there's no document that my congregants or donors can hold me to account on. So it's all about them trusting me and me being a moral person, an upright person. If I've got 50 million in an account and no one's going to really know what I'm doing with it, I know human nature. I'm going to get a little loose with my spending most likely.
Right.
And so
secrecy does not enable good behavior. It enables bad behavior.
Yes, we always say ultimate power ultimately corrupts.
Yes.
And so even if your church is only $50,000 a year, you play by the same rules that I play by. Mm-hmm. So it all falls back on the moral integrity of man, and that is a brutal, place to or status to live by. Mm-hmm. Because based off this book, I know the hearts of man.
Right.
And it's like, we need external accountability. I need external accountability in my life. You need it as well, right?
Right.
And so it's right now the institution that is supposed to be the beacon of truth and integrity and transparency, which is the church, actually plays in the darkest legal sandbox of all sandboxes. And then as soon as you question the sandbox, they say, oh, you heretic, you antichrist, you spawn of Satan, and I'm like, no, I'm just questioning the box, Mm-hmm. We should bring accountability into this box. Why? Because I said it, $550 billion is given annually to Christian churches in America. That means the Christian church could radically transform the social fabric of America almost overnight if we utilized and stewarded those resources properly. Mm-hmm. But we're not. And so what has happened, capitalism has crept into Christianity over the last 112 years. And now capitalistic mindset, which is what? Ownership, profits, and growth, those three main tent poles of capitalism have crept into Christianity.
Right.
What are the three main tenets of Christianity or of the Christian church? Love no other God before me, love your neighbor as yourself, and share. It's antithetical. So when I said capitalism has nothing to do with Christianity, I meant it. Mm-hmm. Capitalism is not a bad thing. Two things can be true at once. Capitalism can be a good economic driver, but it shouldn't be involved in Christianity, because Christianity in its own book says this runs antithetical to the desires of man. In James, it says pure and undefiled religion is to help the orphaned and widow that in their distress and to be unspotted of the world. That means to fight every natural instinct of Nathan, which is, I want to build wealth. I want things. I want to be comfortable. I want.
I want to surf the wave pool.
I want to surf the wave pool. Exactly. And so it's like, we have to run, Christianity is so beautiful because it pushes against the instincts of Nathan. But capitalism has crept into it now. And now it's, hey, Danny, if you believe hard enough, you're going to be blessed. If you give enough, you're going to be blessed. And so capitalism has corrupted the nonprofit sector, which is the social system of America. Mm-hmm. That's why in the nonprofit sector, so in the for-profit world, Danny, you can start a business, you own that business, you can finance it yourself, and then guess what? You deserve the profits off of said business because it's based off of your work ethic. You own that business. In the nonprofit world, you don't own a nonprofit. This is my favorite question when I'm almost getting arrested at a church. Is all their security guards surrounds me and they're like, you got to get off this. This is private property. And I go, who owns the property? And they all go, because none of them can answer the question.
They all say it's private property.
Yeah, it is private property. It's owned by the corporation.
Right.
But who owns the corporation? No one owns the corporation. Legally. And so that's the beautiful thing about the nonprofit sector is it was never meant to be a capitalistic sector. There is no ownership. Mm-hmm. It's not about profits. It's become about profits, but it's not about profits. And so what's happened is the nonprofit sector is corrupted, and you learn this in the religion business. And so now there's only two solutions to reforming the nonprofit sector. One is the government, and then two is we clean up our own house. And so that's what I'm encouraging is let's clean up our own house. We don't want the government to do it because the government's not very good at doing much.
Right.
So let's clean up our own house.
So you've almost been arrested multiple times going into these churches?
Oh, yeah. I've been arrested once. I spent the night in jail in Texas.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, just for being on the property, just for standing there with a sign.
Where did you go there?
That was in Grapevine in Dallas, Texas. I had reached out to this church for a couple years. So this pastor in particular, in religious exemptions, pastors, there's this interesting thing called a housing allowance. Mm-hmm. So if you're a pastor, you're going to be taxed on your salary, but you won't be taxed on your housing allowance. It's a tax-free stipend. Okay. And so there's this gimmick now where you can offset a lot of your tax burden if you take the majority of your quote unquote salary as a housing allowance. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so you might take $100,000 in salary, but then $500,000 in a housing allowance. And so there's one pastor in particular who, through a lawsuit, the only way you can find this data out, because remember, there's no legal documents holding churches to account. So the only way you find any of this information out is through discovery and lawsuits. And so there was a lawsuit, I believe in 2005, and in discovery, the housing allowance list got put out to the public. So this pastor, his housing allowance was $240,000 a year on top of his salary. And so I'm reading the housing allowance doc, and it's going to pay for your down payment, your home, your mortgage, your property insurance, and it lists everything down to light bulbs and home cleaners and house cleaners. And I'm like, this is pretty nice. So this pastor can spend $250,000 basically a year on whatever.
Wow.
So the problem with that is that's 2005. This is 2024 at this point. So you've got 19 years have passed, and I have his real estate. So he owns a beachfront home in Florida, which I think is valued at $10 million.
Oh my
He owns
God.
a $6.5 million home in Dallas. And so the mortgages alone totaled about $300,000 a month. Oh my. And so my question is, or the estimated mortgages. So my question is, what's your housing allowance today? Because that'd be $3.6 million a year in housing allowances. And so I just would call him, and I'd call the church. Hey, I have a question. No one would answer. Mm-hmm. So I finally reached out to their lawyers, and I was like, hey, I'm in town. And this is in the show. I'm like, I'm in town. No one's called me back. And it was a Friday morning when I called the law office. Mm-hmm. And I left a message, and I'm like, I'm in town. I'd love to chat. And if I don't hear from you, I'm going to come to church on Sunday. So I'll see you there. I don't gotcha anybody. It's
right.
like, I want to talk.
Right.
And so we show up to the church service. They ID me before I even walk in. So I'm walking in the front door, and this is all in the show too. And there's this big officer. Mm-hmm. He sees me, so he jumps on his comms. I walk in. As I'm walking through the door, their head of security passes me and looks at me. And I walk into their bookstore, and I'm trying to buy a book, a sweatshirt, and get a cup of coffee. And then I'm going to go into the service. I'm not here to disrupt. I'm here just to do my little due diligence and do my thing. And instead, they surround me. They walk me outside, and they're like, "You need to leave." They wouldn't let me buy the sweatshirt, and I'm like, I want to buy your goods. Like you've got a store. Let me buy your sweatshirt. Mm-hmm. They wouldn't let me buy it. And so
this isn't the one. I saw the first episode where the chick walked by with the $400 beanie she was wearing.
Oh no, that's
Okay.
another one. I think it was more than $400. Yeah, that's a funny one. But so this is episode 4.
Okay.
And so they're like, "You need to leave," and I'm like, "Why? I want to come to church. I'm not bothering anybody. Like, you're bothering me, actually. Like, why are you kicking me out?" And they're like, "You need to leave. This is private property." And so that's where I go, like, who owns the property? They couldn't answer it. I leave. But the night before, I figured they would do that. So the night before, we made signs. And all it said was, Pastor Ed, what is your housing allowance? And what is your salary today? Because I also know who's on the new housing allowance list for this year. And he had put his wife on it. And he had put his lawyer on it.
Wow.
So the church's lawyer, this is ironic, who was also the CFO of the church at this point. So you have the general counsel who's also managing the money. That's called a conflict of interest of this multi-million-dollar church. Very big church in Dallas.
Is that not allowed? Can the CFO be a lawyer, like a legal counsel for any corporation?
Well, it's just a conflict of interest.
Right.
Because you're representing your own financial decisions for a multi-million-dollar organization. Like you're either the CFO or the general counsel. Like it's just a conflict of interest,
right? I see what you're saying.
And so I show up the second service with my signs. I just walk into the parking lot. I don't even go into the building. And I'm just standing there and probably 20 armed security guards surround me. And it's hilarious because they're all Mickey Mouse. Like one's wearing all black, one's in all camo. You know, one says like private security. Like they've just bought it all on Amazon. You know, and they all like
Mall
most
cops.
of them have guns though. And then they do bring their one deputy out to quote unquote arrest me. But his other guy had already put his hands on me. So they violated my civil rights multiple times. My elbow, they tore a tendon in my elbow.
What?
Yeah. I went to the doctor because I couldn't straighten my elbow. And he's like, you can either have surgery or just PT it for a long time. So I still can't straighten it.
You got to get some stem cells, dude.
Yeah. But it's, so they arrest me and they charge me with criminal trespassing for just wanting to ask him about his housing allowance.
Wow,
Yeah.
dude.
And, so get out of jail the next day, and he's one of my favorite guys, because I want to know, because he's such a.
What's his name?
His name's Ed Young Jr.
Ed Young Jr.
So this is what I mean by capitalism creeping into religious organizations. His church is tens of millions a year in revenue. No one knows where the money goes. No one knows his housing allowance. No one knows his salary. He drives golden Range Rovers. He just did an extension on the church that has an underground parking garage for his cars and a pickleball court for himself.
Wow.
This is the church. And then they're doing another raise to quote unquote build a new building, and they're raising 30 something million bucks. No one's even seen a budget for the build. It's called the Anchor Project.
And he's legally not, and this guy legally doesn't have to report shit to the IRS.
Nope. And this is the thing we've turned churches into capitalistic ventures. And so smart businessmen and women have taken leadership roles, and the sky's the limit in the sector.
Let me ask you this. Are these guys also lobbying politicians to keep it this way?
Yep.
That's not surprising.
Yeah. So like this guy's Ed Young Jr.'s dad runs a 90,000 person church in Houston called Second Baptist. We were just there and got escorted off by their police. Awesome, amazing police, by the way. But so this is how shady it is. So his dad took over that church in the 70s. They have $1 billion worth of assets, that church, $1 billion in assets, 90,000 members. That church is a Baptist church. So that means that those 90,000 members get to vote on what happens with the money, budget, all that. That's really healthy, right? Ed Young Jr.'s church in Dallas and Grapevine does not allow voting rights. Well, him and his lawyer, the CFO in Dallas, go down to Houston, remove his dad out of power, put his other brother in power, and remove the voting rights of 90,000 members.
Wow.
So now $1 billion corporation in assets no longer has voting rights from its members who funded the whole thing, and it's managed by 6 people. Those 6 people, 4 are related, and the other 5th is the lawyer I'm talking about, and the 6th is the random. So they now have carte blanche reign over $1 billion in assets, all in the name of God, and there's a lawsuit happening right now over that.
Who's suing them?
A group of congregants that want their voting rights back, yeah.
Wow. And how do they convince all these people to donate this money?
Misinterpreted scripture. Give us 10% of your money. You need to tithe to us. Hey, give above and beyond. And Christians are generous people. This is the thing. Christians are the most generous people in the world. They give a lot. But the Bible doesn't say just to give. The Bible teaches you to steward your resources, which means, hey, I'm not going to give to something that is just building an enterprise or institution. I'm going to give to where Christ told us where to give. The hungry, the thirsty, the naked, the poor, the prisoner, the sojourner. And so what the churches do now, like the Mormon church, for example, the Mormon church is worth $300 billion. Probably closer to 350 now, 350 billion. They'll hit $1 trillion in market assets in the next 15 years. A church.
They got a new TV show. You see that, Mormon Wives or whatever?
Yeah. It's right in my backyard. I'm in Utah.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
But so they'll hit $1 trillion in assets. The Mormon church made $25 billion in profits in the market last year. $25 billion. And guess what that is? Untaxed. Because they're a church. And so this is where it gets even crazier though. They gave away $400 million to humanitarian aid.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, that's 2% of their profits. They demand their congregants give them 10%, and they keep 98% and put it back in the market.
Oh my God.
So talk about the Antichrist. Talk about institutional power.
Yeah.
Talk about 666, Neuro Caesar, where everything combines religion in a monarchy is a theocracy with unlimited power, unlimited resource, accountable to no one. And again, every religious institution in the U.S. is set up like this. So what's happening is you can also, there's a church, Ed Young Jr., the guy in Dallas that had me arrested, he also acquired a church here in Sarasota.
Oh, wow.
So the thing with churches is, or nonprofits in general, is when you shut a nonprofit down, you can't just take the cash and walk away. You either have to give the assets away to another charity or give the money away to other organizations. So what you do is you can keep a failing, like let's say I had a nonprofit and you were a successful nonprofit, but I had a church that was paid off. So 20 years of congregants have paid down this beautiful, cathedral that you and I are sitting in.
Yes.
The building's worth $25 million. Well, I can just sell you the building. You take over the debt. So you're going to go to your congregants and say, hey guys, I need $25 million to buy this building. I take the $25 million, put it in my pocket and just never shut the church down, the entity down.
Oh, wow.
So the real estate side of this scam is the biggest financial scam happening in churches right now, because what you're doing is you're leveraging generation after generation to remortgage a building. And leadership is just sucking that money out and doing what they want with it. Wow. So generation after generation is paying down the same building.
That's bananas.
It's crazy.
The same thing's going on with Church of Scientology. They own, they're one of the top real estate holders in the United States with all the real estate that they own.
You know who's bigger? The Mormon Church.
Oh, really?
The Mormon Church owns hundreds of thousands of acres here in Florida. They actually want to build their own city. They're planning on building their own city outside of Orlando.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's called Deseret Ranch right now. Yeah.
That's fucking crazy, dude.
Yeah.
The Scientology thing's wild too, because this whole area that we're in right now is like one of the hubs of Scientology. L. Ron Hubbard was literally had his boat parked like less than a mile away from here.
What's that great L. Ron Hubbard quote? If you want to get wealthy, start a business. If you want to get rich, start a religion.
Yes. Great quote. You know, he was buddies with Aleister Crowley and he was buddies with Jack Parsons. He was a wild dude, wrote a lot of science fiction. And, you know, it's interesting that Scientology is like one of the cults that has been able to survive. You know, like there's so many evil cults that have been taken down, right? You got like the Children of God cult. And there's a ton of them like that, right? That preyed on children and trafficked people and stuff like that. And it seems like Scientology was able to get away from that kind of stuff. And I wonder if that's maybe how they survived, because there has been accusations of them abusing people and like enslaving people. And they have their cadet org where they raise the babies, they keep the babies away from the parents. And they also have the Sea Org where people work inside of Scientology for basically no money. And you can see them walking around the town here. They wear these like little blue vests and they look like zombies. Crazy. And it's alive and well here, at least. I don't know how it is all around the rest of the world. But
Scientology, you mean?
Scientology, yeah. You know, and some people, when I've talked to them, explain, you know, that Scientology at the base level at the introductory level isn't like that bad. It's kind of like, it's all about eliminating all the negative influences in your life, you know, becoming a better version of yourself. And it's very self-help, Tony Robbins type stuff.
Yeah. And
it isn't until you get to like all the way through the hierarchy of whatever it's called, Xenu, that you start to learn about like intergalactic aliens and all that kind of weird stuff.
The Mormon church is kind of like that too. I just shot an interview with a couple people that were ritualistically abused from 3 years old on.
Really?
And you know, they allege that they saw kids get murdered.
Oh.
They would take this thing called the blood oath. And so a child would be murdered in front of them, and then all the kids would drink the blood.
What?
And it's and they say the same thing. They go, this isn't a fringe part of the faith. It's baked into the very foundation. But for the most part, the lay people at the bottom are like, this is amazing. This is a great faith, right? It's do good, like love your neighbor, pool our assets. But then as you move up the hierarchy, it gets darker and darker. Yeah, was
this like some weird offshoot of it?
This is they allege it happens in the temple, one of the temples in Salt Lake, and
like one of the main primary temples.
This is in season 2, episode 1. We're gonna drop names. These girls dropped literal names, and I'm trying to corroborate 2 bits of evidence, and we're about to corroborate 1. And you're talking about blood oaths, which is blood atoning, and then this idea of sin atoning, which is if you have sex with a child, you basically, that's how you purify your sin. And so these girls claim they were 3 years old on.
Oh my God,
yeah.
dude.
Yeah, it's a big, big story. So season 2, episode 1 is about child sexual abuse, because so season 1 is all about the problem, the financial mismanagement, the legal architecture in the U.S. Season 2 is all about how the Christian church can actually solve most of the social issues in America, from homelessness to foster care to prison systems. But it starts with sexual abuse. Most of our social ills in America stem from child sexual abuse and trauma that happens when you're a child. And so the first episode is about child sexual abuse and how religious institutions often incubate it as opposed to keep it at bay and fight it.
I had a guy in here who was part of the Children of God cult. And he said when he got into it, he was basically like a hippie roaming wanderer, kind of like just roaming around the country. He had no job. He had no purpose or meaning to his life. And he came across these people that were like preaching the Bible to him and Jesus. And he was very desperate, right? And he really had nothing going on for him. And he was seeking purpose, a community, something to be a part of. And when he got into it and he started recruiting people, that's the exact type of people they would look for, other than like, they would use this thing called, what was it called? Flirting, fishy flirting or something weird.
Flirty fishing.
Yeah. Weird. Where they would use like attractive women that were in the cult, young women, to basically like honey trap people into joining, like getting men and like having sex with them and then like convincing them to join.
Yeah.
And again, like it seemed to aggregate all of the most desperate people who had no sense of purpose, no sense of community, no job, what have you. You know what I mean?
Well, that's what.
And those are the most vulnerable people that get preyed on when it comes to things like, sexual abuse and any kind of, you talk to any prostitute on the street or any like drug dealer or someone who's, and go to Skid Row. And I guarantee you all of those people had no parents growing up or or very close to that, bad situations.
Yeah. So exactly. And to your point, Christianity like Christ says, I didn't come for the righteous. I came for the hurting and the broken.
Yeah. And
it's like, but the hurting and the broken are vulnerable. And when you have a capitalistic system that their main target audience is the hurting and the vulnerable, we got a serious problem. So I always say where there's financial abuse, there's sexual abuse right behind it. Because if people don't know your finances, I can use those finances to cover up other crimes.
Wow.
And this first episode of season 2 is wild. It's clocking in at 3 hours and 2 minutes right now. We're going to try to get it down to 2 hours.
This is the first episode.
It's huge. We go
Do
after.
you have like a cap on how long it can be?
2 hours. Yeah.
Okay.
So every episode, so season 2 is a rolling release. So we focus on child sexual abuse. We talk about how, the state, our country's ICACs, which is Internet Crimes Against Children units, are hyperly underfunded. The war on drugs at the border, I think, gets $40 billion a year from our federal government. Our entire national ICACs get less than 40 million. And I can't remember.
And ITAX is what exactly?
ICAC is an Internet Crimes Against Children's Task Force.
Internet Crimes Against Children.
So it's like our main front line for child sexual abuse in America. And these guys are badasses, and you meet a bunch of these men and women.
So they're like online, like monitoring,
they're the
like
ones
NSA
scrubbing,
type shit.
Yeah, they're the ones scrubbing roadblocks and all that.
Right.
And so, but it comes down to less than it comes down to less than $1 million a year per ICAC that they get federal funding on. So they're extremely underfunded. Mm-hmm. What you learned about this in this episode, one ICAC officer from Florida, actually, from Pensacola, an amazing dude. He's like, I had to turn a dad away. A dad comes into my office, or he asks for me, and he comes in, he goes, hey, someone's asking my 6-year-old for naked photos. Whoa. Like, can you please track this? And he goes, I had to turn the dad away because we couldn't buy a $300 hard drive. We didn't have the budget to buy the hard drive to put the files on. And he's like, I had to send this dad away. And he goes, so I come back to work the next day, and I'm working on my computer, and the front desk calls, and they're like, hey, can you come down? There's a man here. And he's like, I walked down, and it was this dad. And the dad goes, will this hard drive work?
He buys the hard drive.
And he buys the hard drive, and Chris goes, yeah, that'll work. And then he pulls another hard drive out, and he goes, I bought this for the next child's dad that walks in, and pushes it over. And he goes, that's the main problem with ICACs is we're so underfunded. And so my goal with this episode is to say, hey, Christians, we can 10 to 50x ICAC funding, and it would be a rounding error for our churches. We wouldn't even see it on our financials. So we can become the front lines for children. And so every episode in season 2 is a problem and a solution on how we can actually get it done.
Wow.
But yeah, so the problem right now is, again, religious institutional structure. It goes back to 1913. The guardrails on that system have been corrupted with technology, and we haven't reformed it to the point now where that 1913 structure is so corrupted, it doesn't only incubate financial abuse, it proliferates it, and then it incubates sexual abuse and predators right behind it. And so everybody's like, why are there so many predators coming out of churches? It's not rocket science. Look at the structure of the church. You don't need to legally background check your employees. If a predator wants to volunteer in a youth group, oftentimes I don't need to be background checked. Wow. Guess what? Religious organizations are not federally mandated to be reporters. And so here's my question. Ready? If we run a big church, a $50 million a year organization, and a young girl comes in and says, hey, this pastor me in the bathroom, our natural instinct is going to be to say, oh shoot, like we got to keep this quiet. This is going to hurt the brand of the church. And since we're not mandatory reporters, we don't have to call the police. Clergy should be mandatory reporters. If someone comes in, there's 7 states, I believe it's 7 states that are mandatory reporters. Other states are not. So instead, we want to fix this internally, which means what? I'm going to use donor money to pay off this victim's family.
Jesus.
And so a good friend of ours, Elizabeth Phillips, is pushing Trey's Law right now. It's in DC right now. It'll be on Trump's desk, hopefully within a month. It just passed with a unanimous vote in the Senate. I believe it's on the House floor in the next few days. It's called Trey's Law. But churches were using NDAs to silence victims. So a church is using a non-disclosure agreement to tell a kid they can't tell people they were at this church.
That's just evil personified.
100%. And it's like, this is the church. This is supposed to be the beacon of light, the beacon of truth.
Yeah.
And this again, it's about the legal architecture of the system.
I just started reading the Bible not long ago for the first time, and I was advised to read it backwards. So I started with Revelation.
That's big.
It's crazy as fuck, dude.
It is.
It is insane.
Yeah.
Shit that's going on. Like,
yeah.
I don't know. I can't make a valid assessment yet. I'll wait till I get through it.
Where are you at now?
I'm on like, I don't know which part I'm at, but I got through basically everything about the messages about all the 7 churches or whatever. And it's like,
So you're still in Revelation.
yeah, I'm still in Revelation.
You're just starting.
Yes, I'm just starting. And, you know, some of the stuff in there is just, you know, to imagine that somebody was sitting somewhere on an island or somewhere on Earth writing this shit.
Yeah.
Is kind of hard to imagine, you know, because they're writing about like this figure, this ghostly figure with the sword of the tongue of a sword or a dagger tongue. And
Revelation. Who told you to start in Revelation? If you don't, it's a bold move. I'll say that.
It's a bold move. A gentleman who's been on the show a couple times who is a classicist.
Okay.
Who's an expert in ancient Greek. He told me to read it. Well, first he said you got to read it in Greek and read it backwards. I said I can't fucking learn Greek.
Yeah.
But I will read it backwards.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna try and see what
Interesting.
happens.
Yeah. I always tell people like the Bible is, people see it as, oh my gosh, it's 66 books. It's so complicated, or at least the current canonized most popular version is 66 books. It's just one story though, you know, and it's about creation and then the fall of creation and the redemption of that creation. And so I always tell people, look at it as one massive historical story. And that's what really, I've been in church. I was raised in church, like in a car seat, you know? And so when I finally read it cover to cover, I said, Nathan, I'm going to read it without I don't want to try to get any revelation from it. I'm not trying to see how it applies to my life. I just want to read it for what it is as a history book. And when I read it just as history, without my like youthful bias, you know, being raised in an institution, that's when the book came alive, because you realize like, oh my God, there's fire raining down from heaven onto altars and burning up altars, you know,
right.
and dead men are raising up, and like it's a wild story. It's like Lord of the Rings, you know?
Right. Yeah. No, it is. I kind of got corrupted though, because I've talked to so many religious experts on this podcast and so many like scholars in different parts of, you know, ancient religion, ancient history involving Christianity and the Romans and the Greeks. I kind of have I already have a warped perspective. So I wish I could, I try to like reset myself and like go at it with a blank mind, because I hear a lot of people talk about it the same way you talk about it, how it's just like, it's this crazy kind of, it opens like a portal to, you know, when you read it, and it's like, you can connect with it and it does something to you. And I'm trying to get there.
I always say for me, it's like, I see it as, it's the history of humanity. It's the greatest literary work of mankind. And so there's something, because I sit with a lot of atheists, agnostics, Muslims, Christians, and I have a love for everybody. And I'm like, this book will teach you something, whether you believe it's divine or not. Like, it's a brilliant book. And then Christ, like I'm how would I say it? Like I push against everything. So I pushed against that book most of my life. And
really?
And I pushed against like the deity of Christ. And, you know, he says, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No one gets to the Father except through me. And I pushed against that for 35 years. I couldn't rationalize it in my head, how, you know, there's only one way technically to our Creator, to our Father. And so I wanted to disprove it, actually. I'm like, I want to prove this thing wrong. And over the last 10 years, just like you, I think it's divinely inspired, but I've gotten to sit with some of the leading theologians and scholars in the world. And it's just, it's fascinating to hear from brilliant minds and different perspectives and, you know, different theologies on that book. And so the book, I'm obsessed with the book now. It is a literal obsession.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of my biggest interests is like, who the hell was Jesus Christ and what was he really doing? Like, if you could take a time machine and go back 2,000 years and see like what he was really doing and who he was talking to and like who he really was. Because, you know, with that telephone game, that 2,000-year telephone game, I imagine it's going to be really fucking hard to keep that story accurate. And there's people that have warped it over time, not just with literal translations of languages and being generous with those translations to fit whatever their narrative is, but also people, not just now, but throughout history, these church fathers have been profiting off this for a very long time. Yeah. So there's a very high potential that story's been warped to an extreme.
Yeah, I have this theory, and I call it the pendulum theory of Christ. And I don't present it publicly very often, so I'm going to present it to you. And when I see Christ in that book, I'll you know how pendulums swing left to right, and there's always like
Right.
so over here I see like my mom and my brother, who are these extremely conservative Christians who believe this book is the divinely inspired, the Word of God. It's
Right.
infallible. You know, in Christ is the literal Son of God who was born and died, a virgin, died on a cross, raised
Right.
and resurrected, and is coming back. Like that's this literal conservative version of this book.
Yeah.
And if you swing the pendulum all the way over, historians unanimously agree that there was a historical figure named Christ who was crucified by the Romans.
Yes.
So
There's a couple wackos out there who don't believe he was real.
for sure, but
What are they called? Mythicists? Is that right?
Oh, I don't know.
I think they're called mythicists.
Okay.
They think he was a myth.
But let's swing that as the other side of the pendulum,
Right.
right? And so Christ is on this pendulum, and his teachings, though, were so profound in Israel at the time that they killed him for it, right? Because he was pushing against an institution so hard. So I always say, like, if we see Christ on this pendulum, whether you believe he's the Son of God and the infallible Word of God is accurate, and he was born and raised and resurrected, or he was a man who taught to love your neighbor as yourself,
Right.
and love no other God before me, but he died on a cross but didn't resurrect, that's the pendulum. And this is where I see that verse where Christ says, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No one gets to the Father except through me. No matter where you fall on that pendulum, I believe the ethos of Christ, the logos of Christ is going to meet you there. Because when you look at his teachings about loving your neighbor, and Matthew 25 about helping the hungry and the thirsty and the naked and the sick and the poor and the prisoner and the sojourner, when you really get into the weeds of Christ, that is the way to love others above yourself. That is the truth, actually. Put the ego aside, you know, and that is the way I experience life. Like you as a father, I'm a father, like giving yourself to a child and like they are above you. Their needs are above yours. That is like the ultimate. And so I always talk about this pendulum, like wherever you fall on that pendulum, if you're searching for Christ's true, the logos behind Christ, you're going to find it. And, yeah, so it's like I love that. Like you don't have to be this legalist, obsessive.
Right.
This is infallible Word of God. No, Christ is going to meet you. His teachings are going to meet you where you're at if you're searching. You know, but so many people just don't search.
Right.
And so that's the beauty of Christ. Is I think like I love talking to people wherever you're at on that line and that spectrum, because it's like I've wrestled with it from this side of the pendulum all the way through. You know, and I'm kind of moving along the pendulum like this sometimes. You know.
There's a lot of chatter online, and the White House just released those alien files or whatever. What do you think? How do you think that affects religion or the church? Or my take on it, a lot of people think that it's going to like destroy religion. I don't think that. I think people are going to find a way to cope with it. And just like I can cope, just how, you know, any person like you can get over a contradiction in the Bible. I think most people are going to are going to be able to cope with the fact that like aliens are real. You know, I think that that's not going to, for most people, I think people will find a way to get over it or get,
well, and
be
what
able
would
to
you
cope
call
with
an angel? What would you call a spirit?
Yeah.
That can, you know, transfer through realms. I would call that alien.
Right.
You know, it's like, who knows what's out there? I don't know what's out there. I don't know what the files have. But again, it goes back to that idea of belief or faith.
Yeah.
Like a belief is legalistic and rigid. I have faith. Like, and I'm excited. Like, show me whatever you got, bro. Like,
yeah. Well, there was this guy who was on, this guy named Hal Puthoff, who was on Joe Rogan's podcast, and he was on a bunch of other podcasts recently. And there was like a huge thing that came out with him. He worked for the government in like the 70s or 80s, whenever Nixon was. And under Nixon, he was tasked to put together a report on what would happen if they disclosed all the UFO stuff. And part of the report was like a pros and cons list. And on that pros and cons list, was like organized religion, what would happen to society and people who believe in or are part of organized religions. And that was one of the cons, is that it would have a drastic negative effect on religious institutions and people's faith and stuff like that. And that was one of the reasons they decided under Nixon not to release the UFO stuff. So I'm always curious to hear people's takes. And there's lots of people, like another professor of religious studies that we had in here, Diana Pasolka from North Carolina. She is of the belief that a lot of the stories in the Bible and stuff, even stories that were taken out of the canon, she thinks that they were likely the same thing that we're seeing in the sky now, whether you want to call them angels or whether you want to call them UFOs.
Yeah.
She thinks a lot of that same stuff is probably a lot of the same stuff.
Well, have you read the Apocrypha or any of the apocryphal writings?
No, but I heard it's great.
It's amazing. Like, you got to realize the Apocrypha was in the Bible until 200 years ago. So you had a whole set of books that have been removed from this Bible. Every Christian read those books or studied those books up until a couple hundred years ago.
A lot of Christians stay away from that, right?
Yeah. And you gotta think why. It talks about dragons. It talks about all sorts of things.
Right.
Christ actually quotes one of the writers in the Apocrypha. And so that's my favorite play is like, for my Christian friends, I'm like, well, don't you want to read the guy Christ was quoting? And they're like, nope.
Who did he quote?
I think it was the book of Sirach. It was a parable about, I can't remember. It was a parable about a flower. And basically this guy, I don't want to butcher the story, but makes cakes. Yeah, he makes cakes for, I think, the needy. And it was supposed to be for his daughter's wedding. And he goes back and the flower just keeps magically appearing.
What did you search, Steve?
Book of Sirach?
Yeah.
No, you got to type in Jesus's quote.
Yeah, type in story about flower. Yeah, there we go. So apocryphal book of Sirach.
Jesus quote.
Yeah. The fruits disclosed. Yeah, so all I'm saying is that the Apocrypha is a brilliant set of books, but it doesn't bode well for the modern institution. It's very
Yeah.
They talk about Nephilim, they talk about giants. It really goes down that.
Is the Enoch part of the Apocrypha?
Enoch's part of the Apocrypha.
Okay, I see.
It'd be considered an apocryphal writing.
Right.
And what's crazy is the book of Jude. Like, you flash forward to the book, right? And this is what's crazy.
I read that too.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Not the book. I read the letter to Jude. Is that what it is?
Yeah, it'd be Jude.
It was like a one-page thing.
Yeah, it's right before Revelation. So this is what's cool about Jude. Here we go, Jude.
Yeah, what's he asking for, the soldiers or something there? He's like, give me your soldiers.
Well, the crazy thing about Jude is he quotes the book of Enoch. And so it's just fascinating to me that you have books in this Bible that quote apocryphal writings, but people don't want to read the apocryphal writings. And you have to ask why. Like, our original, like the 66 book canons authors want to quote the apocryphal writings. Why don't we at least want to read them?
Right.
And again, they were in the canon until a couple hundred years ago.
And then so you have the infancy gospel where Jesus kills a kid.
No, that's not. There's a lot of gospels that I don't know about, and a lot have been. There's a lot of scholarship on certain books if they were if they were written by an anonymous writer who was writing under the pseudonym of one of the apostles, decades or 100 years later. There's a lot of stuff. I am not a biblical scholar in that regard. There's far more brilliant men and women out there than me in that regard. But
the infancy gospel about Jesus when he kills a kid in the infancy gospel. And then I think he brings him back to life afterwards. I'm not sure. But yeah, there's so many of them.
But it's like this shouldn't scare any Christ follower.
Right.
And again, I go back to that pendulum. It's like anything that comes onto the table, read it and pray on it and meditate on it and, do research on it. Like, research is a brilliant thing.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of scholarship out there, and it sounds like that's what you thrive in, which is awesome.
Yeah. I just love hearing people's different takes on the biblical stuff and the ancient religions and
well, let's go. Like, I want to get
and
to
like
this
even
one
like
point.
the Eleusinian mysteries is what got me into all this stuff. This book by it was called The Road to Eleusis by Carl Ruck, Gordon Wasson, and Albert Hoffman. And Carl Ruck was a Harvard classical scholar, so basically a Harvard Greek expert.
Yeah.
And Gordon Wasson was like a mushroom expert. I forget what the word for is. It ethnobiologist or something. And then the other guy was the guy who made LSD. And they wrote this whole book about the Eleusinian mysteries in ancient Greece. How these people, there would be this yearly thing where people would go to Eleusis, this temple in Eleusis, where they would partake in these mysteries, these mystery rites, where they would consume wine that was allegedly contained this fungus called ergot that grows off wheat, and it would produce a psychedelic effect. And basically the idea is this is where the whole story of death and rebirth comes from. And Persephone.
Is this where they found it in the jar? The jars they've traced it into the jars.
Yeah,
and
I think so.
They found the psychedelic laced in the jars.
Yeah,
jars.
That's part of it for sure. What is this, Steve? Because this is the infancy gospel. Because you have such a boy, you can't live with us in the village, or else teach him to bless and not curse. No, that's not the quote. Anyways, read the infancy gospel.
I'll check it out. I've never even heard of it.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
If you enjoy watching our show on Spotify or YouTube and you want to be more involved, I encourage you to please come check out our Patreon community. Not only does our Patreon community get every episode you see on YouTube early, fully uncensored, and ad-free, but we're also doing Patreon exclusive episodes as well as live Q&As, and you can get your personal questions answered by our guests every single week. For me, being able to collaborate and communicate back and forth with our Patreon community every week has been huge. And this is my way of saying thank you for the cost of a cup of coffee a month.